Today we circle back to something briefly mentioned in the last episode, unpacking some white folks' discomfort with the phrase Black Lives Matter.
This is Jews Talk Racial Justice with April and Tracie,
a weekly show hosted by April Baskin and Tracie Decker.
In a complex world, change takes courage.
Wholehearted relationships can keep us accountable.
So Tracie, in our most recent episode, a lot of interesting themes came up, and I wanted to circle back because you alluded briefly to the story I told about someone in my personal professional life who I recently connected to this person, and I wanted to dig a little deeper into that exchange because I think that there are several interesting themes there and that I think may relate to conversations or statements that happen in the Jewish community and within our organizations at times more broadly. And so I think us doing some additional exploration and unpacking from that will be helpful for not only us, but also for folks listening in. You know, I was in a conversation with someone the other day, and he was talking about a conversation he had specifically to spell it out so that people have some context to what you alluded to earlier, this idea that that it would have been nice if Black Lives Matter, like I said that with a little bit of a Jewish lilt, you know, and it would have been nice. It would have been nice if sort of an offhand comment that it would be easier to advocate for this with conservative members of our Jewish community in the broader world, because, you know, all lives matter just sounds so nice. And, you know, Black Lives Matter, people get hung up on it. There was a little bit of nuance in what he said. I mean, immediately internally, and I like this person a lot. We're just getting to know each other. And I think he's a great person. And I immediately bristled because I really adore and respect the minds of Black women, and of people of color. There's critiques. People feel comfortable making critiques of Black leadership and Black leadership decisions in a way that they don't. With other folks, and particularly when the movement has been as powerfully success. Like, and to me, it's interesting. Like, where are you placing the emphasis on the movement's efficacy and the huge strides it's made in the last year, or our communities some of the holdouts within our community around embracing a very simple idea about the humanity of Black people. Anyway, it was just said in such a way that it was said, and it sounds similar to other things that I would immediately push back against. And I may be missing some of the flavor and context of the conversation.
I also bristle when you are telling me this story. My response is just no, you know, I mean, it's that reaction that says like, why do you have to say that is just a fundamental misunderstanding.
As someone who was as someone who was working within the professional sphere he's in, and I realize part of what's problematic about it, the professional sphere of working with other people to help them understand it. You know, he was saying it would be nicer if the language were easier, right? But there's a certain level. There was a certain, and he said it in a kind, you know, it was all in the midst of a kind conversation, but it gets back to some of my fundamental friction points with people in certain facets of my community, where the level of privilege, as if this was some media campaign, as if it weren't as organic and absolutely necessary. We have nothing else left to do, or very few options remain that are peaceful. You know, there was a significant amount of detachment from it that is not accountable to the life I have lived,
Or just the
or,
context of
or
it.
people of color,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
the hashtag didn't, it wasn't cooked up by a media company. It was a reaction to repeated killings of Black folks.
And young
It
ones at that,
it was
oftentimes young
it was a,
children.
yeah, yeah. I mean, Tamir Rice and
Mm.
others. There's so many, again and again and again and again, and so it was a reaction like Black Lives Matter too. In addition to your life, it's it's not, it wasn't, so the it wasn't cooked up in it by some PR campaign who like misjudged. It was a genuine reaction. And the other thing about it that I would, if I were in a conversation with this person you spoke to, I would say would be to tell those folks who are balking, like when we said save the whales in the 80s, people didn't see it as like, well, screw all those other fish. All I care about is the whale. I mean, we read it as whales are endangered. And so let's do something about it. That's what Black Lives Matter means. Black people are endangered in our society. So let's do something about
So
it.
then that makes me want to take a few minutes and unpack, like, so what's happening invisibly in that conversation and those dynamics, right? Because part of me, like, my mind went into, and I believe it's Maya Angelou who talked about this, um, that one of the core purposes that racism serves, and that happened to me in this conversation, is distraction, right? Like I began thinking
Yes.
about Isabel Wilkerson's book and caste and different things, but then as I thought about it later, I was like, no, everyone in the world knows that Black people are in the United States are discriminated against. So this is, so like in this conversation, this person to a certain extent or another was accepting this willful racist, maybe not intentionally racist, but very much racist denial of basic facts that are deeply entrenched in the history of the United States, that thousands of books and hundreds of movies have been produced about.
And
That's
millions of
been
people's lived
all, and
experience.
then and if this conversation happened post this summer, the entire world
Saw
saw
it.
that.
Yeah, it's, yes,
So
yes. And it's, I think I want, it's not, it is not intentional. And I think that is, I'm glad that you sort of said that because I think that's very clear. And I don't know, it reminds me of, I have had similar conversations around the phrase defund the police. And I was on the
well,
side
parts of it,
saying,
like it depends on which part is not intentional, right? Because
the
there is a certain point at which
from
they
your
do
from your
make a
acquaintance
choice,
from your
right?
acquaintance, I don't think he was intentionally saying I'm gonna be racist. He
No.
was, he
Oh,
was
absolutely
reacting
not.
to,
No,
no,
he
I
was
mean, he
endeavoring
actually,
to be an ally.
he was saying like, how could this be more palatable to the people to whom I know it's not palatable. So his intentions were good, but
Oh,
we
can I
all
name
know
something?
impact and
Ooh,
intentions don't.
right. And there's something inherently, I want to hear what you have to say. And I just had a thought about it. And there's a layer of racism around how it's the Black people's job.
Yes.
Like, as opposed to it's my
Yes.
people, and my people are being racist and a part of a system. And so these amazing leaders have done this incredible work. And now it's my job to do some work, especially someone who's not getting targeted by the cops daily or has to worry about the welfare of their family members, to say this in a way that's more contextualized within my community, right? And so to me, like, and again, some certain things like that might happen anyway, but in the context of the history of racism and slavery, where the expectation was that things get done because of people of color, it's a similar kind of thing here, as opposed to being like, wow, they started this international movement that is leading to so much change and impact and is raising visibility. How can I assist with this? You were
Yeah.
going to say something. Thanks
I
for letting
was
me out of my aha.
no, I was gonna make a point about defund the police, which I had a similar sort of conversation where I was on the side saying, can we come up with language that's less inflammatory? And a white a colleague of mine in the work said, Tracie, it's not about your comfort. And yeah, it's not about my comfort. And so if I'm uncomfortable with that phrase, then I need to figure out what it means, really what it means, not where my brain goes initially. In the same way that the folks who hear Black Lives Matter and go, well, but all lives matter, you have some work to do. I have
Right.
some work to do around defund the police. Not because I don't see the problem in the way that American policing happens, but because that phrase feels uncomfortable. And so I want to dig into that discomfort and investigate
Right.
what's
Well,
behind it.
and I think, and I think there are multiple layers to it. Oh my gosh, this is so much for like, this is such a juicy episode. Sometimes I get so many ideas and then they all just kind of tumble out of the basket. It's back to me now. It's boomeranged back to me now. Darn it. Right. So, I mean, I was initially like, ooh, that's intense. And then all it took was one infographic of being like, oh, right. In our cities, all these services around mental health, around housing, around all these different fundamental issues that are directly tied to the safety of a city and what people feel they need to do in order to, get their basic needs met, like food and shelter.
Right. Right.
It was so disproportionate that I was like, oh, and then for me, I was totally on board. And some of these things I might want to come back to have like further conversations about them because we're touching on so many juicy things here. But to your point about the discomfort, there are two things that come to mind. Do you want to say something before I
No, it's okay.
continue?
I think I saw the same infographic.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's, and so once I saw that, I was like, oh, cool. Right. So I think that there are a few things. One, it's uncomfortable to directly face systems of power. That's terrifying. It's more than uncomfortable. It is terrifying. Like, what is the backlash? And it also is directly confronting that early childhood programming that nearly all people in any society receive of the state is looking out for our best interest. We should simply be grateful. But it also leaves out the ways in which the state can systemically hurt and endanger and damage people, right? So that's one thing. And to me, there are elements there, I wonder, around some elements of internalized depression that people who are targeted by oppression in different ways have around the niceness dynamic that might not even be conscious, just around, isn't there a way to say this more pleasantly? And I just want to be really clear to listeners, especially to some of the people of the global majority. That's the phrase I like to use at times for people of color. That I am not saying, to be very clear about the earlier conversation. I was aware that something was off about the conversation with this new friend of mine. And at the same time, I am very interested in doing that deeper work, which a number of people of the global majority, for a variety of legitimate reasons, don't have the stomach for. And I do. So I want to be clear here that I'm not saying, and also this goes for white folks too, that I'm not saying that I believe that it's useful for me to do that, and it seems worthwhile. And I have some of the bandwidth and access to different folks and different resources that help me heal and process these experiences. Do you see what I'm trying to say here, Tracie? The nuance I'm trying to, right? That in general, I'm opposed to canceling, and there's certain people where the racism is just so extreme, and just other traits they have that I personally don't choose to spend time with them. But if there is someone along a range of issues who we connect in other ways, if I can use that connection to both learn from them as well as give them meaningful feedback, just as that very person in other parts of the conversation gave me great meaningful feedback about other elements of my life where they have expertise, and was incredibly helpful. And so I've been doing healing work for years and continue to do it. So I have the bandwidth when annoying, although if one was there, I think his sincerity in that moment really carried a lot of weight. I know, but it's still, I bristled internally.
Right.
But this was in our first conversation, but
I think I want to come back to what you said about it distracting, because I think that's actually an important piece of feedback that you said quickly, and I want to unpack that just a little bit, because I think that, especially as you talk about the sincerity of this person you were talking to, he probably doesn't realize that it was a distraction. Like, he genuinely was interested in thinking about the language, but that's one of the ways that we have been sort of programmed to kind of divert the conversation away from the thing that's super uncomfortable. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember. I think you were still in the States when we realized that that children were being held in cages, basically, with the family
Yeah.
separation policy, and some of the activists, immigrant activists and human rights activists, were calling them concentration camps, and there was
Yeah.
this movement, or this sort of grumbling about calling them concentration camps, and that it was somehow disrespectful to our families who perished in the Shoah. And I knew at the time that was straight up distraction. I mean,
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
because it's not about what happened in the Shoah. It's about what's happening right now to human
Right.
beings on the US border. And so, and that it's the same sort of thing, that it's the person or people who said, hey, should we really be using the phrase concentration camp, weren't actively intentionally thinking, I'm going to distract away from this human rights abuse.
Efforts, liberation efforts of people
Right.
who
It
are.
wasn't a self-conscious intentional move, at least for most people. It was sort of like, oh wait, there's, and then kind of a rabbit hole. But the
Well, to me, in
effect,
part, it was
but
a specific and intense version of hurt people, because there's unresolved trauma there, and for all the films that have been made, there's still not appropriate attention to the the extensive nature of anti-Semitism, and but criticizing and critiquing people who are fighting for people who are in essentially modern day concentration camps is not helpful.
I actually was on a radio program around the time with an activist from CASA, Maryland, which is a immigrants' rights group here in Maryland, and then a woman from CARE, I think, the Council of American Islamic Relations, but sort of the Maryland chapter, who were all
Nice.
there, and we were talking about this. There was an event, Lights for Liberty, that happened, and I was representing Jews United for Justice, and the radio host, asked me about that as sort of the Jewish representative in this trio, and my response at the time was, you know what, let's let historians figure out what to call them. Let's get rid of them, and then we can figure out
Yes.
what they should be called.
Right. Well,
And
right.
that's kind of
Right. And
my
that's your point
feeling.
about
Yeah,
distraction. Like, why are we, like, people are suffering and children are experiencing long-term traumatic emotional and psychological and spiritual damage right now.
yeah, yeah. And so I guess that's kind of my reaction
How are we
to.
interrupting that?
And yeah, exactly. And that's my response to this fella who was like, what would have been a more palatable phrase? It's like, you know what, let's figure that out later. Right now, let's do what we need to do to dismantle the structures that are allowing Black people to be endangered on our streets.
And rather than accepting the racism that's being directed at you as someone who's allying, and turning back around and putting that back on us, of people of color, you can be like, oh, this is exhausting.
Right.
It's really obvious that racism has been really bad in this country ever since it started. And someone literally just got choked out on the street, broad daylight execution. Everyone has an issue with this.
Right. Let's not tone police. It's not about the tone. Yeah.
Right.
It's not about wordsmithing at this point. Like,
and as different comedians, I think his name is Michael Che, as different comedians have noted, it's a very mild statement. Michael Che's whole thing, it's not, it's not like stupendous. It's just it's like the minimum baseline.
It is minimum. It's minimum baseline. Right? Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's just matter. That's what he says,
yeah.
So there's healing there. Like, and there's ways, the amount of numbness and deceit and internal denial one has to go through in order to critique something that is that obvious?
It's, well, yeah, white supremacy runs deep. It is powerful, and well defended.
And at
So for,
times even more powerful for people who have been targeted by it, who've been given conditional access to it,
yeah,
who also have wealth or privilege, which is precarious in its own particular ways, and also has their different isolating dynamics around our culture. And so all the more that there is reason there to be in profound denial,
yeah,
but it's not an excuse. And there are plenty of owning class and upper middle class Jews who are able to be accountable to
yeah.
that. So it's not impossible. It's a choice.
The analog that is coming up for me, as you're talking about it, like, and coming back to what you said about blaming Black folks for racism, like that, like putting it back on Black folks for like what are the right words or the whatever. I'm remembering, this is a long thread, but I'll try and shorten it. Um, in Robin DiAngelo's book in White Fragility, she talks about this student of hers who says, a white student who said, you know, I was really lucky because I grew up in an all white, in an all white neighborhood, and so we didn't have any racism. And D'Angelo talks about how horrible that is, like so innocent and yet and yet so
So
naive that
inaccurate,
and
right?
inaccurate, right? Like that racism is Black people's problem, is a problem with Black people, that when they come, that's when racism comes. And which is a similar sort of thread, not the same, to what to this sort of why can't we use different language. And it also reminds me of those who say or believe that somehow the Holocaust was the Jews' fault, which I saw a statistic recently that some startling percentage of American young people actually hold that belief, which for our Jewish listeners, I hope is making you cringe, because it should make us all just really, really nervous. It's a similar sort of dynamic. So that was my long
Yeah. And the
thread.
last thing I'll say is that, like, I haven't thought of it. It usually takes me a little while to think of a corollary, but like to me, that's like it's a little bit like the Black Lives Matter thing, and it's not at all the same. So this isn't the best example. It's almost like somebody being like, it's so hard to pronounce bat mitzvah. Like, why can't they just make it bar mitzvah? Like, it would just be so much easier if you just called it like the Jewish rite of passage, right? Like there's right, like the level of entitlement to come into a community and say, offer something about their culture or their liberation strategies is quite chutzpahdik, and is indicative of the positional power a person has, that they feel that they have any right to
Comment.
dictate something, even just in casual conversation, but just to think that they would have any idea,
Yeah.
or even
Yeah.
if they did, that they're that somehow that's smarter than the folks deeply involved in the trenches.
Right.
Thanks for tuning in. Our show's theme music was composed by Elliot Hammer. You can find this track and other beats on Instagram at Elliot Hammer. If this episode resonated with you, please share it and subscribe. To join the conversation, visit JewsTalkRacialJustice.com, where you can send us a question or suggestion, access our show notes, and learn more about our team. Take care until next time, and stay humble and keep going.